Welcome back to the Why God podcast. And today we're talking about celebrities in the culture. Or just Christianity in the culture in general.
Or just celebrities in general. Just joking.
When you think about Christianity in today's culture, what's the first thing that pops up?
When I think about Christianity in the culture?
Yeah. In terms of media and...
Oh, in the culture, not Christian culture. I think about big boxy t-shirts with doves on them.
Can you clarify, please?
I think if you, when you see a lot of Christianity blending with culture, and by culture, I'm assuming just like this modern 2024 Western idea of Christianity. I think a lot of them dress really nice, and culturally, I see a lot of Christian. I don't know. You know where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
I see a lot of Christian merch, and one thing that always, not that this is a bad or good thing, but I just like first thing that pops in the head when I think of culture, I think of they got a strong fashion sense, and there's a lot of I see like the dove on the t-shirt.
Yeah.
That's what I see when I think of Christian
Yeah.
Christian culture. A lot of fashion, a lot of streetwear, which is actually pretty cool. I think if it's done right.
Talking about fashion, I think one thing, or like in the popular culture today, is a bunch of mega church pastors. And there's that one Instagram account. The Instagram account exposes the price tags of mega pastors' clothing.
Like preachers and sneakers.
Yes,
You ever seen that one?
Yeah, that's the account I was talking about. And a lot of the clothes sometimes it's like Stephen Furtick's pink sweater, $2,000.
Wait, actually?
Yes.
$2K?
Yes, or a
Whoa.
pink sweater.
Wow.
And I think if they are the most popular pastors or the face of Christianity, some people will think Christianity is just about the money, or Christianity is just
Yeah.
a motivational game, just another TED Talk.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that's actually, well, depends. I could say that's a big problem, which it is. I think it gets, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm just going to run with it. I think that is a problem in the grand scheme of like how ego affects, or how being in front of a congregation and in a crowd affects the ego and everything like that. But I mean, obviously clothes and fashion and things that people wear, some people be like, why are you so quick to judge people based on what they wear? But the thing is, it's like, I don't know, because from an outside perspective, it's weird to see someone who is supposed to be preaching about humility and all this stuff and talking about Jesus, who never came as a king in the like world sense, and to be like talking about like, oh, how God is humble and how we don't need to cling to our possessions and how we store our treasures in heaven and all that stuff. It's weird to see pastors in such earthly valued things. Like, it sometimes doesn't make sense. I mean, in their defense, not that I'm trying to defend them, but I would understand if someone rich in the church, or somebody was like, here, I bless you with this $2,000 t-shirt because I made it, I own this brand, all this stuff, and your words have really pressed into my heart, so I'm giving you this, and you wear it because it's nice and you love it and it's cool and all this stuff. But I do think it's weird, and it's as some people would say, it's an ick if someone is dressing for the culture. I don't know.
It's like that one church you're telling me about, where I'm not sure if it was in Texas, but they have a huge Ford Bronco on the ceiling. And if I could see Apostle Paul walk into a church, look at the ceiling and like, oh, there's a car for sale. inside of a church,
100%.
I think some tables would be flipped.
Oh, without a doubt. And I for story time, I went to this church one time, and I would name drop if I knew the name, but I actually don't. But it was, I walked in. It was like a big mega church, and they were doing a sermon series. They're doing this gets me riled up, and I'm trying not to get riled up on the podcast, but they were doing a sermon series on like being built tough, being built strong. And like, so for their thing, they had a deal with Ford. And there was literally 2 trucks on the outside of the church before you walked in, just like in the patio area. And then when you walk inside in the like lobby foyer area, there was another Bronco just sitting there. And it's not that to be built tough, to be built solid is a bad sermon series idea. It's not bad to draw inspiration from other brands and be like, yeah, we're like, it's like a spin-off of Ford because their logo is built tough, all this stuff. But it is weird when it seems like you picked it seemed like to me that they picked the branding before the message.
Yeah.
And they picked the idea that they want to sell all this Ford stuff, and they had this deal with Ford, which I think is actually just really gross, like disgusting for a church to do stuff like that. But it was weird not weird, I think it made God sad that they had chosen like the deal before making the message. And it comes a lot to like the problem, like a big problem is, or something that God even tells us to be aware of is like what is truly coming out from inside? What is the real message we are preaching? Are we practicing it? And is it like just something to tickle everyone's ear, or is it like actual truth? And I think not know this on churches that have a lot of people, or churches that have a big congregation, or churches that can gather a good crowd. Like, I think the problem is in like, if a mega church is purely designed around just attracting people and bringing people in, and then shaping a message to push any other agenda other than
God,
truth and God and repentance and the gospel, then I think they're not utilizing the authority or the stewardship or the gifts that God has given them, and they're just using it in a way to like be famous, be hip, be in with the culture and all these things. And like I'm not against contemporary church. I'm not against contextualizing the truth and the gospel. But when it is, and a lot of people will use that as their defense when they do things in the church, but I think what a lot of churches do, and they use the excuse that we're contextualizing or we're keeping it hip and contemporary, is what they're really doing is just saying whatever they want to say and doing whatever they want to do that they know brings in people or brings in money, and they're doing it just for their own gain or just for the church's gain.
Yeah.
And I think it gets really muddy and it gets really dirty, and I don't think God likes that very much.
Yeah. The problem that I see with that is that there's this huge car on the ceiling, but then like the cross is so physically appearing, the cross is smaller than that car, which is like you're like, this is the house of the Lord.
Yes.
This is the presence of God.
Oh yeah.
And it's like you're cheating on God in his own house or in his own bed.
Yeah.
Or like you're cheating on your wife inside of your marriage bed. And that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And it feels like instead of God being the center, the message and Jesus is just an advertisement for the car, or it's just an advertisement for your own gain or for your own money. And at that point, since there's a spirit behind money and greed, like you are using God's name in vain to push another god.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is not okay.
It's like, what God do you have in your house?
Yeah.
What God do you have in your church?
And that reminds me of the Mark Driscoll like controversy that's happened. I think it was like a month ago.
Here's the clip.
I'll try
I'm
to
just
show the clip
joking.
if there is.
If you want to, yeah, throw it up there.
But essentially, they had a men's conference, a stronger men's conference, and before Mark Driscoll got on stage to give a message, they had a whole bunch of performances. They had monster trucks. They had fire. They had all these cool like guy things.
But I like monster trucks.
And it's not a bad thing. But towards the end, there was even this male dancer who was swinging around a pole.
You telling me you wouldn't do that? No, I'm just joking.
Like, how does it? I'm not saying that
Holy
you
Spirit,
can't worship the Lord,
like
but I don't think that's worshiping the Lord by dancing on a pole shirtless. If that was a female, it would be outrageous. It would be scandalous. But just because it's some guy at a men's conference makes it okay. It does not. And what Mark Driscoll did before he got his message, he was like, the spirit of Jezebel has invaded this church, and I rebuke it, and all that stuff. And the other pastor kicked him off the stage. And it was like, that was wrong. You should have done that in private. You shouldn't have said that on stage and stuff. But most Christians' reactions were on the side of Mark Driscoll, even though he has his own controversy in his own life.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree that that's not okay. And if that is the face of Christianity, pushing to new believers and to non-believers, then I would be pretty disgusted, or I wouldn't want to be a Christian, because what is the difference between the world and Christianity if Christianity is just another advertisement for their own gain and for their own money and pleasures?
That brings up a couple thoughts. Shoot, and I'm losing them. But like, I guess the first thought is, how does somebody navigate living with their Christian convictions and like calling those around them to those same convictions? Like, is there a spot where you're like, oh, maybe this is just for me, or I gotta tell this person, like, you are weirdly obsessed with men dancing on poles. like how do you navigate that, even as a pastor, or even just as somebody in the congregation speaking to your friends? But because like I can see it, and there's like, I see it as like there's a spectrum, of like super godly and super ungodly, and that one falls closer over here. But what if there's all these other things that are like, like, where does this stand? Like, if we say, oh, we're just making a joke, you're being too sensitive, you're being like, you ever hear that? It's like, I've heard that a ton, especially growing up and in high school. Like, when some people started taking their faith seriously and other people started taking their faith less seriously and eventually stopped believing, they'd be like, oh my gosh, like, you're like, we go to church and stuff, but you're super godly. Or they would say it's about other people. They'd be like, that person, I want to be like this person, but they're too godly, they're too Christian-y. But it's like, is there a too Christian-y, or are you diluting your truth, kind of thing?
Well, I think just as a Christian, you want to balance, because when we say things like too Christian-y, it's usually you're too legalistic, and your church doesn't allow you to raise your hands during worship, or you have to follow all these rules, and that comes with a bunch of shame from the community, and you can never come back and stuff. Or the other aspect where your church is too weird, it's too focused on like emotions and emotional highs, and and kind of like exploiting the gifts of the Spirit in a way where it's like, I don't know, it kind of dilutes it in a way, or kind of turns it into a circus, or a circus act. Not saying that the Holy Spirit is a circus, but sometimes they put it on display like a performance. Sometimes.
Totally. And even like, yeah, because then it's like when you run the church and you allow things, and people will say jokes in a sermon, or like do like a promo little video beforehand, like most of the time it's fine, but sometimes for some people it pushes. There's like complaints. They're like, I can't believe you would show this, or I can't believe you would say this on the stage in front of people. And it's like sometimes like, oh, is this person being legalistic? And usually I'm like, oh, these people are being way too legalistic. But sometimes I like question in the back of my head. I'm like, deep down, am I being a blind Christian right now?
Am I being lukewarm?
Am I being? Yeah, exactly. Like, I asked myself a question. I'm like, would Jesus do this? What would Jesus do? Like,
yeah.
And there's things like that. Like, even I know for my school, when I went to a Christian school, they're like, you're not allowed to watch any scary movies. You're not allowed to watch any horror movies because it's not God honoring, which makes sense. And I heard some people and they're like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'll watch whatever movies I want to watch. I'm not doing it. I'm not acting in anything. But it's too, like, if your eyes are the windows to your soul and you, like, whatever you like take in and all this stuff is like, it's interesting to me because I'm like, is it a sin? And one of the high schoolers asked me this the other day. They said, is it a sin to watch scary movies? And the part where I kind of landed on it was, I read in I think it's 1 Corinthians 10 or something. It's like, all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I don't think you're sinning against God by watching a scary movie, but what good does it do for you and your walk with God? What good does it do? But then there's also the thing where it's like, if you're giving all your attention to that for like 2 hours, but you can't sit down and read the Bible for 15 minutes, like, what are you doing? Like I don't think God's going to send you to hell for watching a scary movie. But at the same time, like, if all you do is things that draw you away from God, how good and how close are you going to be to Him? How well will you ever know Him?
That's interesting.
It is an interesting thing too, and I feel the same about like even we were listening to the Drake music. Because, you know, we gotta stay in. We gotta stay in with the culture. Had to see what this Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef is, and I'm like, if I was just listening to this and some random person who wasn't a Christian came and sat in the car, and they're like, "Are you guys Christian? Do you like this music?" I would be like, "No, I just want to hear about the culture and see what all this like fuss is about." But at the same time, I'm like, would Jesus be like, "Yeah, I'm rocking with this," or I don't think he would. I think he'd be like, "I'm gonna go pray instead." Just like things that we would say are like, oh, too Christian-y in that sense, like not even legalistic, none of that, but it's just like sort of like, where are your desires kind of thing.
My stance, well, I've thought about scary movies before, but personally I don't like scary movies because I don't like being scared. And
that's valid.
I think my thoughts when it comes to scary movies is like, why are you... I don't mind when people watch them, but it's like, personally, why would you want to go to something that the purpose of a scary movie is to instill fear into you? Mm-hmm. And I don't like to watch I don't mind the ones where it's some creepy doll or some thriller.
Yeah.
But the ones that put me on watch are the ones that are spiritual, demonic, like ghosts, or like, or have to do, or the ones that have to do with like the devil or Christianity.
Yeah.
And it's like, those things are actually real. Like, it's not a game, and sometimes you can, like, I wouldn't say you can catch demons or spirits from a movie, but it can allow room for the enemy to like put a foothold on your heart if you're not careful. And personally, I find scary movies kind of boring. The last time I went was to Annabelle 2, and I fell asleep. But when it comes to music, I do have that conviction sometimes, like, oh, are we being good influences to the people around us by listening to this stuff? But I think that's just a journey we'll have to go on ourselves.
Yeah, but because even in that, like, outside of even music that has swearing, for me, I did have to stop listening to a lot of sad music.
Yeah, me too.
Because I would just get sad. Like, and I was like, why am I depressed right now? I was like, oh, it's because I just spent 3 days straight listening to only Frank Ocean.
Yeah.
And it like, not that it was a sin or it was bad or whatever. Like, sure, some of the stuff he says is definitely anti-God and whatever. Sorry, not whatever. But, you know, like it's not like, oh, dude, there's bad stuff and all these things. It's just like sad music.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but at the end of the day, it goes back to that question. It's like, I can do this, but it's not making me feel good. It's not uplifting. It's not encouraging. It's not like, I mean, I like it and I enjoy it. It sounds good, but dang, like it's taking me to a weird place in my brain.
Yeah, I had that thought too. It's like when I listen to, I had to stop listening to sad music because, when you're going through something tough like a heartbreak or just something happens in your life, you start listening to sad music and it's like, oh, I'm vibing out. I can feel this. This artist is speaking to me right now. But it comes to a point.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Taylor.
My gosh. She's the one that causes my sadness. But it comes to a point where, am I listening to this music because I'm sad, or is this music making me sad? Because how are you supposed to come out of? Oh my gosh, there's that ambulance. How are you supposed to come out of depression or anxiety if you're still stuck? If you're still stuck.
If you suck.
Yeah, if you suck. How are you supposed to come out of depression and anxiety if you're still stuck in the same atmosphere that supports it?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to find healing by listening to Billie Eilish all the time.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, and that's the crazy thing. I see a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, so don't think I'm like shooting shots at anybody, but a lot of people, even some of the people closest to me, carry this victim mindset. Like, oh, I'm depressed and I'm stuck in this depression. I'm like, dang, that really sucks. It's like, man, it never gets better. Like, all this bad stuff. I'm like, what music do you listen to? Like, listen to sad music. I'm like, oh, why? That's not going to make it any better. It's like, but it's the only thing relatable. It's the only thing I enjoy listening to. I'm like, like, you know, it's like, it's like we feel pain, and pain is like indicating that something's hurt or broken and whatever, all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, that it's definitely a valid feeling to feel depressed. It's definitely a valid feeling to feel sad, to grieve. There's a time for everything. But, you know, there's a time to come out of it. There's a time to, like, put the bone back straight, even though it's broken and it's going to hurt, but you need it in order to heal. And so there's a time to turn off the sad music, and there's a time to, like, get up off your bed in your own time. I'm not saying do it right now or nothing like that. I'm not saying you're weak or anything, but in your own time, there's a time, and with God, of course, it's way more than possible to feel better, to overcome things, to find peace, to find comfort. That's what he preaches it so much, and yet some people are so stuck in this place because they enjoy it almost, or they found comfort in the discomfort and the disorder.
I think I know why, and I've been thinking about this pretty heavily. Is that there's not a lot of good Christian music when it comes to being sad, or when it comes to going through like I guess a depressing phase of your life. Because I'm not saying that it's bad in the sense of the content and the words and being uplifting, but sometimes you listen to rap because it says the words that you can't say in a church. And those are the things you really feel in that moment. Like, oh, I'm angry, I just want to do all this stuff. I don't know. But, and that's stuff that relates to you. So it's kind of hard to listen to Christian music when it's always joyful all the time.
Because it goes against what you're
feeling. But I think Christian music in general is getting better at branching into things like rap, or like I don't know, music that's like Hozier, or that I'm not sure what that style is, but
Sad folk forest
but
depression.
it's getting better at capturing the feeling without actually leaving you in that state. It's like,
without preaching the feeling.
yeah, it like I think there's this one song by Henrik. He used to be a Christian rapper, but he's now more into
Folky.
folky type style, more sad and
That guy's a Christian?
reflective. Yeah.
Oh, no way. I only know one song.
And there was this one song that is talking about the struggle of like resisting sin or the struggle of being a Christian. David Kushner in his song is that I forget the lyrics, but it goes through his process of fighting sin.
Nice.
That like he wants to do it, but he's not doing it, but it's still a struggle. And I think that's the things that Christians are kind of looking out for is like songs that are relatable.
Yeah.
But songs that are relatable, but then it still uplifts you in the end and pushes you back to God.
True. Because that's the thing. I like a raw and authentic view of Christianity. And that's something that even like to keep up with the culture, we put a mask on. And so it's like when a church is trying to keep up with the culture, they also kind of have to put a mask on in a way. And I think something about being so authentic just gives way more leverage and way more truth and way more reality to things. But like with Christian music and stuff like that, you can get lost in it too, right? Like people can put on a mask of their music or like what I'm trying to spit out is like not like you said, like not all Christian music has to be happy and not all Christian music has to be upbeat. And I'm not talking about like worship songs, but I'm talking about just like people who make music and they love God, that it just bleeds into their lyrics and it bleeds into what they do. Like there isn't an obligation for them to preach. They just do it because it's who they are. And like, it's nice to see people, I mean, it's not nice to see people struggling with their sin, but it's nice to know that everybody goes through that and they're praying for one another and all these things. Because you look in Psalms, you look in Lamentations, not many of those are just solely joy and peace and wow, God is so good and I feel butterflies and sunshines and rainbows. Like a lot of them are like, God, have you forsaken me? But it always ends with the conclusion and the truth that God is good. And I think that's why, just being human, we fall into like just patterns of diving into sadness. And we're just using the sadness in music as like one thing, but there's millions of things, like whatever it is, like, we fall into giving into our emotions and doing things that feed our emotions, whether it's happy or sad or anger, because we're emotional humans. And I think that's where we trip up and fall into those areas and all those things, because we have these emotions and all these things. But like if you're looking at the Psalms and all this stuff, it usually starts with these emotions and it starts with these feelings and it starts with these fears. God, I think my enemies are gonna destroy me, or God, can you just save me? All these things. I'm stuck in the mud. I'm stuck in the mire. All these things. It's like starts with this problem, but it never ends with that problem. You know, and that's the thing is like the sad music. It's relatable because we go through these things, but it just stops right there. These scary movies, it starts with these fears. It shows all these things, and it usually ends right there too. But with God, with God, it's a better conclusion. It brings in the full truth. Fear, chaos. It is true, and these are realities of life. But if you know God, there's a hope for the future. And so it's like I say, it's just like God is the conclusion that everyone is kind of waiting for in a way. And that goes for a lot of things. But it's like even going back to the mega churches and stuff, like. Sometimes they get so many people because they play solely into emotion. And is it wrong for a church to play into emotion? I don't think so. Because it helps the gospel be understood better. Jesus used parables all the time. And if you think those weren't emotion evoking, you'd be wrong, because they are emotion evoking. But the thing is, it's not just emotion. It's not just TED Talk. It's like, here's a parable that tugs on the heartstrings a little bit, but let me break it down for you and explain why it shows a greater story to all of this, and how it shows we're sinners. We need God, and God saves, and all this stuff, and how we need to believe in him and trust in him, even when it goes against our emotions. And that's the thing, is like, even when you have to die to yourself, even when you have to struggle to find that peace, even when you have to be persistent in your prayers, even when all these things, like, that is the truth. That is God, and that is the gospel, is like that God saves us, and that we are supposed to be more like him, versus like, oh, God's going to comfort you. You're struggling, you're going through a financially hard time. God's got you. Tithe all your money to us right now. Or, it's just this like, yeah, I don't know. I hope that makes sense. Is like, sometimes we just play into the emotion, just into the gimmick, just into the hooks, just into what is attractive and inviting, but then we just end there. And so people feel good. People feel good after their Sunday services and all that stuff, but it doesn't last like preaching the truth lasts.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth is offensive. But what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, along those lines, another thing I thought about is that, okay, one of my favorite songs is called Deep Fake by the artist Breakins. And
I've never heard of either of those.
It has a really good beat, really good music. It's kind of like, it has a really good bass as well. But as I was listening to the music, like to the lyrics, it's talking about, I want to die, I want to jump off this thing, I want to snap my neck or something. And that was my reaction to myself. It's like, what am I listening to? like in some type of way, like deep, like somewhere in my heart, it relates to that. But it's like, if I'm listening to this over and over again, is it just keeping me in the same place that I want to get out of? Because words do have power. I'm not saying things like law of attraction or manifestation or name it and claim it, but I think there's a thing where if you keep on repeating it to yourself and you're hearing the words that you're saying over and over again, like, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I want to do all these things, or even stuff with like rap, I want to have sex, I want to do drugs, I want to do all these things that are of the world, then where am I pointing my heart towards? Am I pointing my heart towards God, or am I pointing my heart towards the things of this world? But I think a positive thing that's in the culture is like Christians turning or celebrities turning into Christianity. And I do have a opposing thought, but I do like to see when Christianity starts to influence their music, and you can see the way that God is interacting in their life. One good example in the first half is Kanye.
In the first half,
like, he really releases all this music. He did that one song with, it's not 6ix9ine, the other guy.
Oh, Cardi, Playboy Cardi.
No, he did Gucci Gang.
Gucci Gang, the Migos.
Gucci Gang. I forget what his name
Lil Pump.
Yeah, when Kanye did a song with Lil Pump, and he was talking about sex, he was talking about all these types of things, and then a couple months or years later, he drops Jesus is King, and then he starts doing a whole bunch of like Sunday services and talking about God, and I like to see that. I like to see progression in someone's life. That's why I like to watch George Janko, because he might not be the perfect Christian. He might do things like he swears or he smokes or, that's a debatable thing. But he's not the perfect Christian, and he lives with his girlfriend and stuff. But throughout his process, you can see God working in his life, and you can see the sanctification process. And if you don't know what sanctification is, basically like God restoring you back to what he wants you to be, or to like a holier person, which doesn't truly come until you get to heaven. But I like seeing that in the culture, because you're not just flipping on your audience 180, but you're taking them through your process of thinking, and like you're kind of, if people are following you and you
Mhm.
are turning to God, those people will turn to God with you in a type of
They're
way.
being influenced by you.
Yeah.
Because you have influence. Yeah, and that always led me, especially Kanye would lead me to, I was asking the question the whole time. I was like, okay, how do we know this is real? How all this stuff? Because now Kanye's a little off the rails, you know what I mean? He's it's like he's gone back. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people will ask the question like, did he ever actually mean it? Was everything he did fake?
Was it just for clout?
Was it all a lie? Like all these things. And the question I always ask, especially when I see this and when I see big churches, I keep bringing it back to big churches, and that's actually kind of a good thing. But I mean, not a good thing, but like, is the question of how God uses imperfect people. And like, if somebody preaches God but then messes up and their body is, or their life is just a bad example, but when they did this one thing, can God still use that? Like, can God still use it as ministry? Even if you messed up in all these things, like, was it real? Was it genuine? And I was thinking of like, yeah, so Kanye, like, oh, he said all this stuff, like, does that mean like God's saving grace, sanctification, like, does it not actually work? Like, all those doubts and things that you might fear. And I don't know the answer to that, but I do think of the parable where Jesus talks about the guy who's sowing all these seeds, throwing them out, and some landed on the rocks, and so they never sprout up, and some land in the good soil, and they bloom and they're perfect. But the one that I think about is the ones that landed on the shallow soil, and so they bloomed up so quick, but because they weren't rooted deep, they died out. And like, if you don't realize the parable, it's like the gospel is these seeds, and basically the soil is like us almost, and it's our surroundings, even our culture. Like, where are you planted? Basically is like one of those cheesy questions that people ask. Where are you planted? Are you, what community are you surrounding yourself in? Are you in good soil? Are you around good soil? And I think of it like Kanye, because the way it is now, the way it looks right now, is it looks like he was just planted in shallow soil, where he sprouted up real quick. But then when the winds and the weight of the world comes back down, because the roots weren't deep, the leaves fell off and everything died. Not to say that, who knows, Kanye can come back. Maybe he was just in shallow soil for a little bit. He can turn his life around again and again. But I think too, like, that happens for churches, that happens for people, is I think God can do incredible things in a moment. But for us, if we aren't allowing the roots to go deep, if we just take the word on Sunday and we think that that is enough to build a tree, if we think watering a plant once a year is enough to grow the seed into like a full grown tree, then like we're really mistaken. And I think a lot of things, and I see it in other musics, and some pastors, even like Mike Todd. Like he's super controversial now, and people are always like, blah blah, he's crazy, all this stuff. Is like, oh, he just does it for the clout, things like that. But I remember being like, oh, I remember watching like his old stuff, and I'd be like, this is really good, this is really solid. But over time, it's like, well, I don't really watch now just because so much controversy, and I don't know, I just go to in-person church. But maybe it has all this controversy because, like, you know, we sprout so fast, and then because we didn't put our focus on letting the roots go deep, you know, we didn't have the strength, we didn't have the firm foundation, we didn't build our house on a solid rock. It just seemed solid for a moment.
Yeah. And I think just the pressure of having an audience as big as these celebrities is hard too, because like people like us, we don't have, or we get the comfort of not being known by everybody. Not just yet. But when your life is on the big stage, people will just judge you for everything. And I think for a lot of Christians, a lot of new Christians, I know a lot of from conversations with friends that a lot of people that are not Christians or are resistance or they have a resistance to go to church is because they've been hurt before, or because they tried it once and it didn't work for them, or they tried it and then something like it faded out. Kind of like you're saying, the planted seeds on the rocky soil, they sprout up, but when things come or over a period of time, they start to dwindle and fade away. So I think, like, hopefully for Kanye, it's just something like they sprouted up and now he's just going through some type of phase, whether it's because like his marriage and stuff, or like his kids, or just like being watched by everybody. Like, I just hope out of that it's not just like, it's not a dead
Maybe he's
root.
planted among the thorns.
I just hope
choked him out.
I hope it's just a phase and not ending, or not the ending of his faith. But
maybe he's been predestined to heaven. Okay, I'm just joking. That's another topic.
I forgot what I was gonna say, but I guess switching gears a little bit, I do like saying things like celebrities and sports people.
Yeah, on a more positive note.
Giving thanks to God. One example is Ryan Garcia. I love how I love how unashamed he is about. He's so unashamed about God that after every fight he'll give glory to God. That'll be the first thing he says, and that's a lot of his content too. Not saying he's a perfect Christian or a perfect person, but I do like the influence that he has on people, that just by him being in the room or being in the presence of other people are like, he has God on his side.
Yeah, like CJ Stroud, bro. I like CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, the quarterbacks just love the Lord and all this stuff. It's really cool, and I was talking about this with one of our friends the other day too, about just how important should that be to us. We were talking about how, like, oh, I wish I was famous, then I could just give God all the glory. But it's like, if we give God the glory in everything we do, then, sometimes God will just give us the right people to influence around us. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, like CJ Stroud, he's quarterback, and everyone like reposts him on Instagram and social media because they're like, wow, this guy is just always preaching Jesus, all this stuff. Like, he's so awesome. He's so inspiring to me. And like, you read the comments, they're like, wow, I'm an atheist, but this guy's faith is like actually like pretty impressive and all this stuff. It's like, that's really cool. That's really moving stuff. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to be that person, then it's even more important that that's how your teammates see you too, Like, you don't want to be someone who on stage in front of everyone, you're like, yeah, God is awesome. But then off stage, behind closed doors, in the locker room, you're like, F this, F that. Like, and they can't see God in you, truly. Because all these people on Instagram, all these viewers, all these people will see you and be like, yeah, that's good. But if their like daughter dies in a tragic car accident, they want to reach out to somebody and learn about the afterlife and God and all this stuff, they're not going to go to CJ Stroud, but his teammates will. The people who know him will. Because and so what I'm saying again is like I want to be someone who is the exact same behind closed doors, so that when people know I'm about it, they know I'm about it.
Yeah.
And then the people closest to me can trust and know, like, oh, I got to come to you for prayer, like if I need prayer, or I want to come to you if I need more questions about God, or whatever it might be, or just a counsel or a friend or somebody who's genuine. Like, I want to be that person, because, we don't want to be a blind guide who just says they love God, but then they never pray behind closed doors. They never actually take it serious because that's really dangerous, basically.
I remember a point I was trying to say earlier, and it goes along with like celebrities, and sometimes they sprout up out of nowhere and like they convert to Christianity. Like, I like people like Gideon, the Janko people, or I don't know why I said it like that. Gideon, George Janko.
Wait, Gideon's Christian too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Alex Eubank, just a whole bunch of people. But I think when it comes to getting like rooted deep, is that my prayer for these people is that they really get into the Bible. They really get to know who God is, so that when they're in front of a camera talking about God, like people are introduced to Jesus more than just the megachurch pastor of Jesus, more than just the love is love, God is love, Jesus. It's something that's really gonna change and impact their lives. And like for me, I'm on the church social media team and I help. And one thing we're doing is we're posting a lot of shorts. We take the sermons, then we break it up into like little segments, and then we post those things. And we have gotten like a couple hundred subscribers so far.
Yay!
Yeah, it is really cool. It's really exciting. But one of the statistics and facts about YouTube Shorts is that usually the people that follow you from YouTube Shorts do not watch your long content. So in that type of way, the subscribers or the people that are following you off of like a little segment or a little victory where you get to thank God, like are those people being truly converted, or are you just planting roots that sprout and die quickly? And I hope that's not the things for like these celebrities where in one instance they're on fire for God and on fire for the Lord, and then the next they're died out.
Yeah.
Because people look at that too as like, oh, I thought Christianity was supposed to change you. I thought it was supposed to save you. But if that's the truth, then what happened to your faith?
Yikes.
Yeah.
That is a scary one. It's just so terrifying because, I mean, man, so many people want to say like, oh, I'm Christian, all this stuff, but it's like, it's hard. Like, you got to realize like Christianity is not just playing games and all this fun stuff. Like, there's sacrifice and there's discipline, and like if you don't do that, then it's not real Christianity that you are subscribed to. It's just the short. If you're not what were we talking about? If you're not a practitioner of what it is genuinely about, like being a follower of Jesus doesn't mean you just like and subscribe. Like being a follower of Jesus doesn't mean you just go to Logos and buy a Bible. Like it means you are living your life by the template of Jesus and like dying to your things and living for his things and all these things that aren't actually as easy as it looks. And so people are quick to judge Christians who might not even be fully Christian yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like they haven't fully committed to the Christian walk or all these things. And I can't tell you what that fully looks like, because even like we were saying, like we're still walking this thing out. We're still figuring this thing out. And I hope there's grace for that from everyone. But, you know, a lot of the times there isn't. Like you said, like people will see something and they'll see somebody who went through a lot, then became a Christian, and then like they kind of fizzled out because they had a hard time like actually applying the stuff to their life. And then they'll just judge them and say, oh, you're supposed to be perfect and do all this. Like, why do you say all this stuff and blah, blah, blah? And they get on their case, but it's like, bro, everybody is living this life together. And like, the struggle to follow God is an easy one if you go to God. But to let go of all this earth, all the things that we want here on earth, and especially the struggle with the culture of just like when you're in a culture that is just surrounded, or when you're surrounded by a culture that just goes against God, if you're in the world that goes against God, it's so hard to break free from that. Like only through God can you do those things. And it's just tough when people just turn to Christianity only, but not God, if that makes sense.
I think that's the difference between a pastor and a Christian influencer, is that a pastor is supposed to be rooted deep, and the pastor has thought through all these questions that they don't understand, like free will, predestination, or what happens to people, or what happens to people in the afterlife, or if you're not saved, then all these things that you can't answer, and it's hard to conflict with in your life, or hard to come to grips with, that we'll never have this understanding, or it goes against your flesh, and I'm not understanding because everyone else says it's okay, but God says to turn away from it. And that sometimes when you're getting your Christian education from TikTok or from Instagram, YouTube University, and from influencers, you miss what Christianity actually is. Because although I love seeing the progress of these people and stars and streamers going through their walk with God, you don't want to take your theology from them, because they're gonna make mistakes.
They're still figuring theirs out.
Yeah, they don't know who God is fully. Like, they have an experience of God, but do they truly know God? That's not up to me to decide.
And let me find it, because what is that verse where it's like, not everyone should desire to preach.
Just because you have a lot of knowledge about God, you have that experience, and you have a testimony, doesn't mean you should be a shepherd yet.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you have the experience, or you have the equipping of a pastor. Not saying you can't be one day, but I'm saying that, like Daniel says, like, give me the hard battles, give me the hard life. So in those moments, that through suffering comes perseverance, and through perseverance comes experience and endurance for the race. And when you have endurance, like someone like a Christian that has fought through all those battles and all those fights, and still makes it out, and then that people can lead other people. Instead of fizzling out, they could raise up a brand new generation of people and lead the next generation of the church. Whereas a Christian influencer, they are the ones being discipled. They are the ones that are still learning. So it's hard to take your education and your perspective about Christianity from an influencer rather than a pastor. But even that, a lot of pastors make mistakes, and they don't represent Christianity well. Right. What
James.
Verse? James.
Just all of James is fire, especially when on this topic that we're talking about. And I think the big thing is to just be genuine, be real. But it says in James 3, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." Meaning, like, nobody's perfect. So we all will mess up, but people who desire to be teachers are going to be judged a lot harder, because you are leading other people in how they're going to act and how they're going to do things. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous, I think, because like influencers and people, even pastors, of course, they have such big influence. But the thing is, if you do not have the knowledge to back it up, then that is very dangerous for you, and the judgment that could be given to you based on, like, oh, this person did this, and this because you told them to. Because you told them it was okay. Like, which is crazy. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, I did a bad thing. But imagine getting to heaven and God's like, brother, these people are all going to hell because you told them the way that they were living was okay. And they continued, and they believed in you wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's dangerous. And not even that, it's like, and because you used God's name in vain to do so. To say, no, God is totally fine with your sin. No, God is totally fine if you want to do this. God is totally okay. Like, no, I don't think God actually does that. Or, I don't believe in God, so I'm going to do this. And it's so dangerous. Because even when I say that, I'm like, man, what am I doing on a podcast? But I don't go in. And this is why I try not to go deep into depth unless I know what I'm talking about. But what I am talking about is it's dangerous. if you have the influence, if you have people who look up to you and who trust in the words that you say, and you're saying them out loud for anybody to hear and teaching them, then you really better make sure what you're saying is true. But it says that, none of us are perfect. But come on, man.
I do like
Come on,
it
man. It's
when
dangerous.
people are genuine and are real about their walk with God. Like I was talking to this one young adult, and they're saying that they don't want to go to the front of the church and sit in the front because they know that they don't live a Christian life. Or they don't claim to be Christian because they don't live the life of a Christian, which is kind of convicting because like you know that in your heart, but yet you're still living the way of the world. But I respect that honesty better than someone that says, or that someone that pretends to be Christian and says, "Oh, I'm living my life like this and it's all perfect," when behind the scenes, it's not.
Ooh.
And it goes back to that verse that says, you have to be hot or cold. Like, if you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. And because when you start to blur the lines between hot and cold, it blurs the lines between what a Christian actually is.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're talking about is that when Jesus returns today, or returns in the future, or like, what will Christianity look like towards the end times? And we're saying that it's probably going to be so divided that there's no middle ground. That either you're a Christian or you're not. Like, you'll know what a Christian
for God
is,
or against him.
or you're against him. And that right now it's kind of that blurred line of what is a true Christian or not in the terms of the culture. But Jesus says he doesn't come to bring peace, but he comes to bring a sword. And that's that dividing line will be who is his followers and who is not.
That is crazy. And that's what I think I don't know if we talked about it last week, because I might have brought it up after we finished the podcast.
Yeah.
But in Japanese, in Japan a long time ago, they had missionaries come. And missionaries came to Japan and all this stuff. And then the government of Japan was like, okay, we can't have this much Western influence, or we can't have this much influence from white people and all these things. We got to get them out of here. So they're like telling them to leave, and they're like, you have to deny Jesus. And they were telling even their own Japanese people, they're like, you got to deny Jesus if you want to live and all this stuff. And they had this thing of fumi or whatever. But it was this picture of Jesus, and all you had to do was stand on it and step on it, like give it a little kick or something. I don't know. But you had to disrespect the picture of Jesus. You had to prove it. And the thing is, obviously Jesus isn't that piece of wood. But like, it's like, where do you decide to live your life? Like, you can't be lukewarm. You either got to step on it, or you got to decide not to. Either way, you're going to have consequences. One is just delayed. One, you might just go to hell. But like and it's this idea of like, God, maybe for right now, we're just chilling. We're just in line. But one day we have to make these decisions where it's like, do I stand for God 100%? Or am I willing to be a sellout for him? Am I willing to step on this thing? And the crazy part, and I was thinking of that when you were talking, because I actually forget what I was thinking about. But I was thinking about that while you were talking, because, why was I thinking of that? But it's this picture in my head of just like, some people can just deny Jesus, but be like, but secretly in my heart, I love him. Like, I'm just going to step on it and then God will know. He's like, no, dude, if you believe in me, if you have the faith, then your actions will back it up.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you have the faith, you won't, if you believe in God, you will never step on that.
Yeah.
But people are like, but some people, and I don't mean it in a literal way, some people, we step on the fumi every day. And people step on the fumi all the time, because they're like, well, everyone else is doing this, I'm just going to do it too, but I know deep down I love Jesus. It's like, no, you don't, if you're going to do the thing that you know he doesn't want you to do. Yeah. Or you're stepping on him. And what's crazy about that, and especially when we talk about the seeds planted in shallow soil, to kind of like wrap this idea up, is what's crazy is some people would say no, and then the like soldiers or whoever the military guys would torture those people, stop torturing them, be like, do you want to step on it now? And then they'd be like, no. And then they would torture them some more, pull them out, be like, do you want to step on it now? And a lot of them would say yes. And so it's crazy because it's not just will you say no one time to not stepping on it. It's like, will you say no, get persecuted, destroyed for it, and still say no? And so much of Christian culture, maybe even for Kanye, is we're like, Jesus is king. And then you get the backlash of it, and you're like, okay, no, you're right, I need to make some money. Or I got to revert back to what I used to do because it was better for me. It was a more comfortable way of living. I wasn't getting tortured back then. And even if it's like you in school or in work, it's like sometimes we conform to the swearing or the same culture, the same talk as everyone else in the office because we aren't being tortured, because we aren't being persecuted for believing in
a tortured
Jesus.
poet.
But yes. But yeah.
I think this will be my last little blip before we close out, but I think that's why Christians in foreign countries where they're getting persecuted and they're getting so much hate and torture for being a Christian, that's why in those countries it grows the most. For example, like China, they have like 1 million new Christians each day, dude, or each month, and they're not even allowed to practice Christianity out loud or on the streets. They have to go into underground churches and they have to hide, but yet they thrive the most because I think like
there's no hot or cold.
It's not lukewarm. It's either you're with God or you're against God, and when you know that God is real and the Holy Spirit is real and He's moving and active in your life, is like, this is a real thing, and I'd rather die for the real thing than live with the fake. And I hope you're catching my drift when I say in Dune 2 they say they're talking about persecuting. I have no idea what side, but they're gonna persecute the, I don't know,
Fremen?
Yeah, let's say they're gonna persecute the Fremen, but the oh my gosh, let's my words. So they're gonna persecute the Fremen, but the other person was like, no, don't do that because they thrive in persecution. And I was definitely kind of like, it felt like a little
Jesus,
a sneak diss towards Christians because the movie is kind of based upon Islam and stuff. But it's so true because when you start to like hate on the other side and you start to get backlash for it, there's no middle ground. Yeah. You're either with it or you're not, and people will choose the better side, and hopefully the side that holds the truth, which is Jesus.
Yeah, and I think that is. I mean, there's lukewarm everywhere, but what's crazy is I think in Revelation. Now this is all speculation, okay? Warning. I think in Revelation when it's talking to the lukewarm church, when God is talking to, because He talks to all these different churches in all these different areas, and He's talking like, hey, this is your problem, this is how you gotta handle it, or else there's big consequences. And I think when He's talking to the lukewarm church, I really think, I take that one personally. I think that one is really our culture, our area, because we have the freedom to do all these things. We have the freedom for all this stuff, freedom of speech, freedom to talk about whatever religion, believe in whatever we want, invest our money however we want, manifest destiny, all this stuff. Like, we can do whatever we want, but I think we lose so much reverence in that. I think we lose so much fear and awe of God to where everything is lukewarm and distilled. There's no hot or cold. There's no good versus bad. It's just like, ooh, we're at church? I think it would be funny if we put some strippers on the stage, and then Mark Driscoll says this thing. Because it's like, they have so much freedom and lenience. It's almost like having a parent who doesn't discipline at all. It's like, you can do whatever you want, but at the same time, it's like, but then a time will come where you either lived for it or you're going to die for it. And it's like, what side are you on? And the thing that I'll just say it, but in Bible college, the biggest eye-opening about church wasn't my classes talking about it. It wasn't the books or the Bible reading. I mean, okay, the Bible reading was a pretty big eye-opening thing about understanding the church, but it was having chapels on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and seeing all the people who were like, I want to be future pastors, I want to be future worship leaders, and they're on stage and they're doing this thing, and then they get off, and you can't even recognize them. Like, if there were two different personalities, they get up on stage like, God is so good, God is so loving, he's in this place, and then they get off stage and it's like a different day, and I see them at night and they're like, F this, F that, like, just completely. And I'm not talking about swearing, I'm talking about like hatred in their heart. I'm talking about just a non-loving character. And not just a non-loving character, like there was other things of just like partying. A lot of them were partiers. And it's crazy because like, but I thought you loved Jesus. And you're like, are you two-facing me right now? Like, it was crazy. And I wish I could have said it was a small demographic, but it wasn't. It was the majority. And I think, and not to blame them, I mean, they can have their own convictions, do their own things, but it really riles me up. But it's the culture, dude. And what they do is just breed more like them. And they just make more like them. Like, people who maybe genuinely did want to become pastors, and they come and they all this stuff, they encounter these people, and they're like, oh, all these guys are doing this. Oh, these people preach on Tuesday, but then freaking do all this stuff on Wednesday, like, or Tuesday night. You're like, what is the real genuine part? And when you're looking at that and you're seeing someone who preaches but then also parties in a bad way, because you can party and have a good time, but see somebody who preaches and then parties, and you're like, okay, what side of God do they follow their life with? Are they either hot or are they either cold? Every time you're going to say they're cold, because like, you can't say you love God and do all these things. You can't say you've sacrificed all this stuff, but then just pick it up in secret. And so it's like, every time, if you're not for God, you're against him.
So I guess the question before we close out is, are you hot or are you cold? And if there's a dividing line in the future that says you're a Christian or not, which side do you think you would be on?
And will you suffer for that?
On the Why God podcast.